Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're back on Friday. It's 9 in Ireland. Welcome to America. It's the Irish Influence, and I'm going to let Joe introduce our guest in a minute. But a usual thanks to the Irish Consulate in Boston for all their support and all the good people in Irish Studies in Boston College. And I'm going to get this in early. If you've got any questions for our guest today, please use the question and answer button, but don't leave it till 27 minutes past 10 when we're finishing. Get those questions in early so we can read them out and have a good discussion. Joe Newton, do your thing.
Thanks very much, Mike. Lovely to see you and lovely to have people here again. And tonight we're going to be talking to Claire Kilroy. Claire Kilroy, she is in where she was born in Howth in County Dublin. Claire was awarded the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature in 2004. She's been shortlisted for the Kerry Group Irish Novel of the Year on 3 occasions. She's the acclaimed author of 4 novels. She took her BA at Trinity College Dublin before working as an editor on BBC Drama. Having begun her first novel all summer, Claire returned to Trinity College Dublin to complete an M.Phil in creative writing and to finish, then to publish her first work. Claire's next novel, Tenderwire, presents a love story between a violinist and a masterpiece violin and was shortlisted for the 2007 Irish Novel of the Year. That was followed by All Names Have Been Changed and The Devil I Know, a thrilling novel about greed and avarice set in a time of economic crisis. It's always a time of economic crisis here in Ireland. We just move from one economic crisis to a different titled economic crisis. It was described by the New York Times as savagely comic and great fun. So savagely comic and great fun is a good place for us to begin. Claire, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Thanks, Joe and Mike.
Great, great. And I'm going to start actually by reminding what I just said there is that Claire's coming to us from Howth. She lives in Howth. You were originally from Howth, and you often situate your novels in Howth. Does that tell us anything about you as an author, the Howthness of you?
It says I didn't get far in life. Well, like the last novel in particular I set in Howth for strategic reasons. I was trying to tell a big story about the crash, the global economic crash, and it was snowballing. And the bigger it got, the more afraid I became of trying to depict something that I could not entirely get my head around. So I decided to approach it by telling it a local way, and what do I know except Howth? So that's where Howth came into that book. But that said, I mean, there's a lot more to how a place person. One of the big things about it is it's the same. It's been the same for centuries because it hasn't been developed. Largely because Howth Castle owned it. They just sold their estate, their domain. But when you're walking Howth, you're aware there's a lot of megalithic tombs left behind. You just feel it that this is a strange place, and you're here, and it's temporary that you're here. And it's a guard. Howth is renowned for its beauty. I should say it's a peninsula. It's a hill. So you have these 2 hills, the East Mountain and the West Mountain, and the sea and Dublin Bay all around. So almost wherever you go, there's the sea. But it is like this Edenic garden where I spent my childhood. So you can kind of access your childhood because it's the same fields. It's the same. They can't develop it because it's been sterilized for building on. And you know, the older I get, the more I see that childhood really feeds into both the adult you are, and especially if you're an artist of any type, the art you make. And that is actually expanding as I keep going, putting the childhood into what I'm trying to do.
That's really lovely. Yeah.
I was just going to say, is that part of not moving, Claire, in the sense of you're still there? I mean, I kind of left my hometown when I was 18, never been back. Therefore, my sense of it is frozen. Whereas, and I don't get to walk those streets. I imagine those streets. Whereas you're walking those streets every day. You're walking past the school gates wherever you were. Is that childhood constantly being kind of reimagined, reinvented by virtue of walking those streets, or is it? How does that work?
Possibly. And now my kid is in the school that I went to. I should say the generation I am, we were a generation of immigrants. So I was like, you know, most kids in the 80s. destined to emigrate, and I did. I went off to Germany and I worked there, and then I got a green card to the States. I worked in New York, and then the boom started, and I would say I'm the first generation who had a future, like a good future in Ireland. And I realized how much I wanted to be in Ireland, and I love Ireland. And just because you emigrate doesn't mean you didn't want to be where you were reared. So I very much felt part of this landscape and relieved and clinging onto it, clinging onto Howth by my nails. I have moved around, and there just is a weird strangeness about being where you grew up, because you see adult faces and you recognize them, you think, you're not sure, and you haven't seen these faces for up to 40 years, and then when you see them, it's almost like is this my imagination, is it real? There was this old lady who had a hunch and it was on a stick, and she had long grey hair down to her hips when I was a kid, and you'd see her in the village. There were a few village people, not the village, but people in the village who'd be just knocking around, and they were strange to a child. And then I saw her one day, I was driving downhill through the village, couldn't stop, and I saw her, and I thought, Jesus, how is she still alive? And then I got a call, somebody I knew had died, and it just felt like, of course it wasn't connected. I didn't see her, but she felt like a portent, and it's just a strange peninsula where strange things have happened. There is history. You can access it. I don't mean to call it a portal or anything, but I definitely feel an electricity and something metaphysical there, and it makes me happy. And when you feel safe and happy, it can lead to creativity.
Beautiful. Thanks.
And does it feel, sorry, Joe, does it
No,
feel different?
no.
I'm intrigued. I've got friends there. I kind of like the area. The one thing I always find interesting about Howth is that small neck of land, that it's essentially an island. I mean, it always seems to me when you're there, in a way, it doesn't feel when you're over on the other side of the bay, that Howth is separate to Dublin. Seems to me. And do you live in Dublin? And you happen to live in the suburb of Howth, or is Howth somewhere separate? Because it does have that kind of big.
Saying, especially like having in instances when there's a pandemic, you stay on the same peninsula, and there were people who only left the peninsula to buy their communion suit and their confirmation suit and their wedding suit, and otherwise their life was on the peninsula, because it's also a place you can make a living. Particularly like the fishermen were very, very rooted. But no, I mean, I love the city, and what I love about Howth is the 26 minutes on the dart and you're in town. And town was, in my teen years, like I needed to get out of Howth. So, no, I'm a Dubliner, very much a Dubliner. And Howth, we are Dubliners. We're not, it's not the Republic of Howth, I don't think.
And you're not the only one, of course, who's very fond of writer who's very fond of Howth. I'm thinking here about James Joyce, but that's going to be a bit later. But I should go back to your childhood in Howth. But I also want to ask you, Claire, if I may indeed, if you can speak just a little bit more closely to the microphone, if you can. Your gentle, soft voice, your gentle, soft Howth accent isn't carrying as well as my loud, booming Mullingar accent.
Righto.
I'm wondering about, I suppose here's the question, were you always a writer? When did you first feel that this was what you were definitely going to do or destined to do or whatever? Is anything, was there a moment? Was there?
Well, like you can't say, I'm going to be a writer, because if you want to be a writer, you think writers are people who can fly, they're that amazing, and you would never declare yourself to be one of these people who can fly. My value system was always stories, writing, art, but like I would never have counted myself amongst their number, and I would have been quite frightened of it. But yeah, like as a kid I was always writing, and it became my identity and my rebellion. My ability to try and express myself in words was central to saying I'm not part of all this. When you're a teenager and you need to find who you are, that's when the writing became a way of self-definition. It would always have been what I would just been frightened to declare it, but it was to me the highest thing you could be. I adored books, I found it really exciting and felt it was, as the phrase now is my tribe, you know, I'm part of this movement, not, I was being reared for export. I was reared to, if I was to stay here where we were all supposed to be accountants, I wasn't going to fit into that, and I hated it. So, yeah, it was a deep love from always. You kind of need that though. You need to sustain yourself to get through this. This has to be your value system.
To get through teenage years, to get through adolescence. Was there a particular writer that you turned to? Was there anyone among those tribe who you thought of as being who particularly spoke to you, perhaps?
It was reading Lolita.
Wow.
I was 16 and I'd never read such lucid prose, and it was many things in bullet points, that something could be so funny and so tragic and so awful and so sexual and so devastating, and also so well done. Like the kind of hidden doors in a text. Even it's a book, but yet there's all these secrets that you don't figure out to the end, or indeed you don't figure out till you come back to it and read it again. So at the age of 16, yes, it was that. I mean, Joyce will also come up, but it was Lolita was the thing that was like, yeah, I'm here. This is me. Banville was a big one, but I didn't discover him till 18, 19. And Athena would be the other Lolita. Athena is a breakup novel by Banville. Not one of his best read books, but again, that funny, sad, clever, enjoys textual games. It's a mystery, except the guy in the middle doesn't really understand it, and you do, or do you? The playfulness of it,
Marvelous.
joy, the drama.
Marvelous. And I wonder if, just continuing upon influences, if influence is the word, after your undergraduate degree at Trinity, I said, you worked in drama for the BBC for some years there.
Yes.
How do you look back in that phase of your life now? Was that influential? Did that change the way that you were thinking or writing, or how did that seem?
It does.
Woman.
Well, the thing is, your editing, it was all on computer. Back when computers were kind of new. And the shooting script would come in and there'd be scenes 1 to 60. And then we in the edit suite, I was an assistant editor, I was never an editor, but we in the edit suite would get, our 60 scenes, and then we'd start reordering them and putting the end at the beginning and putting the middle at the start, and just the act of editing is very clever and very creative, and it gave me this notion that, like, most of my novels start at the end. I don't think the one I'm writing now. No, the one I'm writing now starts at the beginning, or does it? But this dynamic storytelling was learned from how the story is. It's plastic. It's fluid. You just move it around. You move your scenes around, and the final draft is not the final draft. The shooting script is not what you end up with. So yeah, it did, and I definitely took that away with me. How you structure, and editing is my favorite part. Because you're in control. The rushes are in, they're shot, and you've got to shape them, and it's when you can have fun because you're in control of the material. When you're first drafting, you're not in control at all. You don't know if there is a novel there. Until there's a novel there, you don't know that there's a novel there, and that's very stressful. So once you have your first draft, then you can be in charge of your material. I love that. Right. I'm finally coming up to that.
And it does sound then, from what you just said, that writing is the business of exploration for you. You were quite sure whether you're at the beginning or the end of your current novel.
You never know. You're just writing from a feeling, and it's so delicate and fraught, and you're always waiting for it to fall apart. and it usually looks like it's going to fall apart until it stops looking quite as rubbish, and then then things come out and come alive, and then there is. I was talking about childhood and accessing certain states, and you just sort of get there, you know, you just sort of do, and you wouldn't if you didn't sit there and go through all the negative feelings. I remember Anne Enright saying that writing is about managing your emotions, and a huge amount of it is about, yeah, this is crap, but there's something there that I need to get on the page. So you just plow on until you do, and that's the main thing I've learned from the experience is you just keep going, and you find what it is, because you are driven by something, but you don't know what it is. It's like that quote, how do I know what I think? I haven't written it yet. You have to sit down and do that work, and it is work. Clearly. But it's interesting, and it's a privilege, and I love it.
Can I just take a jump back post Trinity and before the BBC? And we've been talking about this to other people we've been chatting to during this series, other writers of your generation. That moment before the Celtic Tiger, and you mentioned it yourself earlier, where the likelihood you're going to have to leave, you're going to have to emigrate. There's nothing here. And given that you so identify with home and Howth, etc., how tough was that to get on a plane and go to Germany, I think you said first, and then the US, not knowing this magic thing called the Celtic Tiger was going to happen and be opportunities at home? I mean, how do you look into that sense of just, I've got to leave? How hard is that? What did you learn from that experience?
Well, going to New York was great because it's a great place. It's exciting. And I do think there are certain things in life that you need to get your head around. Like, for instance, in the 90s, New York was a place I felt I needed to get my head around. Germany, that was a funny one. You see, I think the difference is when an Irish person goes to America, they're like, you're Irish. But when you go back then, it would have been 91 when I went to Germany. When you show up, you're a guest worker, and you're very aware of how poor you are. Ireland was poor, and you're showing up, and you're, should I even say it? It was made quite clear to you where you fit in the scale, and it wasn't a good feeling. And actually, I'm glad I had that, and it also made me understand where the Celtic Tiger, people went mental, buying everything, and head to toe designer gear, and that was coming from somewhere, and because I'd been that guest worker, I knew that feeling of being poor is not fun, and we were a poor country, and it's a crappy feeling. So I was very glad to get home, and I went home to do a degree in English, which was what I'd been working towards since I knew there were degrees in English. That was my nirvana, was to get out of school and go to Trinity, study English, enjoy it, and I loved it. So I needed to travel, and then was very surprised to find I could stay in my country. Very surprised and very happy, and I recognized that I, as being born into this generation, was very fortunate that I could come back, that there was something to come back for, because there hadn't been for so many years, all the years before. My parents too had gone to London to work and to save before they had me, and then they saved money, came and bought the house in Howth. So it is a traditional Irish thing to travel and not necessarily to return, and I was one of the ones who was fortunate enough to return.
And maybe just continuing actually with your travels and your journey, and indeed for your feelings about Ireland. It's been described that it's for you a place that is both lost and beloved, the lost and beloved Ireland. I wonder if that's still the case, but I particularly want to place you, if I may, for the American audience looking in here, in Villanova, where you spent some time. How was that? How was that experience of America? Did you fall in love with the American Academy? Did you want to stay there? Was it good for you as a writer? How's America to you, and how's America to you now, I might ask indeed?
without being over dramatic, Villanova saved me. You know, I have
Really?
this cup here. This is my Villanova cup. The actual Villanova bit fell off, but that's full of water. It came at a time when I had a baby
Oh,
and I couldn't get out of babyland because as a writer, you don't have a big. Can you hear me? By the way, am I talking loud enough?
you're speaking
Um,
beautiful. Thank you, Claire. Wonderful. Thank
I didn't have enough money to pay for childcare because childcare is even more expensive here than the States. It's cheaper in the States, so you pay less tax. So Villanova got me out of, uh, around the clock motherhood because it was a salary and I had students and I could say, sorry, I can't, I have to teach, and my child went into a creche and it brought me freedom. And actually, the book that I'm writing now started in Villanova. And I don't know how much longer that would have dragged on in Ireland with, no income and the madly expensive childcare here. I don't know when I'd have gotten my book. And I remember the Villanova gave me a beautiful house, and it's a very hard winter. Like the winter really was, it was a tough winter, and then suddenly it went from spring to summer in about 2 weeks,
you.
and the place changed into this sunny, hot, flowered area. And I remember the sun streaming in through the house we were in on my child, and I had an idea for a novel.
Wonderful.
And it was like the best gift that I could have gotten, because when you have a baby, you're screamed at and screamed at and screamed at, and it's not a creative state. Some women manage to work creatively and have a baby. I remember reading Barbara Kingsolver used to type books while breastfeeding, and then there's me who just couldn't remember stuff anymore, couldn't finish sentences. So I felt hugely rescued by being brought over to the States and given space and students, and to have to. Another big thing for me was I had to teach Irish literature. I taught creative writing, which that's my area, but I had to teach Irish literature. Therefore, I had to go back to it to be able to speak knowledgeably about it, and that was really good for my brain to go back to the touchstones that made me come to this place in the first time, and to reread them and to remember why I'd loved them, and also to see more in them than I had seen the first time.
Mm.
At a time in my life when it felt like my brain was crumbling apart, I realized that actually you're not all falling apart. This part that interprets novels and plays and poetry is getting wiser on some strange level. And that was immensely reassuring. As you grow older, you
Mm.
know, everything's falling apart on you, everything, your health, your memory, your energy. So to return to books and get more from them was a great comfort. And only for having to do it and for my time being ring fenced by a job, um, it was like rehab, you know? I said it was Joseph Lennon was the man who invited me over, and I told him this was brain rehab. I needed it, I really needed it when it came for me. And we all loved it. It was a family adventure. It's good to travel. Love Howth, but it's good to be somewhere else and to see somewhere else and to enjoy somewhere else.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So Virginia Woolf was still right. A room of one's own is required. That space and that time for a person to put aside for writing. Can you tell me just something about your writing process from day to day? Are you one of these people who's at a particular hour, a certain number of hours, certain number of words, or does it happen in a more organic way?
I'm a jogging writer when I can. There's before baby and after baby. After baby is you do it when you can fit it in. So now he goes to school and I get a good 2 hours to, and that's a run at it. 2 hours is okay because school I have to leave at 1:30 to go get him, and then there's all the palaver of being a mother. But the schools have been shut so often with this pandemic that that falls apart. My all the novels were written the same way in that I collect notes because, as I said, I don't have a plan when I start a novel, so I write these notes towards a novel. Note 5 is the notes for this novel, as it's my 5th novel. And there's at least 250,000 words in there of stuff that could be, it's speculative, and out of that you start seeing there's your beginning, there's your middle, there's your end, and now I'm in a very exciting place right now because I'm finally writing the final chapter. I've been at this book for years and years and years, but because I'm no longer able to write in the way I would like to write, it's interrupted all the time. And I'm fine. Once I have a first draft, we're into the editing that I was mentioning because I love it so much. Editing is freedom. It's in the bag. I see it. I know how to shape it. But I'm on my last chapter now, and it's just grabbed from these 250,000 words of notes, and it just falls into place. And really, it's about reordering it because you're writing the ending and the beginning and the middle at the same time when you work from notes.
Lovely, lovely, lovely.
I was just going to say, is that notes to yourself as you're kind of wandering around thinking, or is there kind of is there a research element to that where whatever you're writing about, you've got to hit the books? When it was a downturn, you really had to get the facts and figures. Is it a mix of kind of your own notes, your own processes, and the research?
It had to be for Tenderwire and All Summer. They were about painting and about classical music, so I had to know what I was talking about there. But the last two, there was some research for the novel about the Celtic tiger. Motherhood, no, so the 250,000 words I'm talking about now is just all the things that could happen to try and tell a story about what it's like. It's about, I'm trying to write a novel about how it feels to be a mother, and that's not really a dramatic novel, it's not a beginning, middle, end. It's just that's what mother is. It's all these emotions, and how do you make a story out of emotions, and that's the challenge. So maybe noted, maybe this happens, maybe that, and then strange things that occur to you and stuff I don't remember writing. And then I remember when I came home from Villanova, we're going back to 2015. So we had bought our first home together with the Villanova money. That's another really important thing, is the colleges put money into writers' pockets. So we bought our first home, and I'm sitting there, and I had this beautiful sentence came to me, and I was so happy because it was proof that the creative brain was firing again. And to celebrate, I ran downstairs and made tea. It was something about birdsong, about how it could have stopped, but you wouldn't notice until quite a while later, and it would be apocalyptic if it stopped. But when I ran back upstairs, the sentence was gone, and I never got it back. And this novel is almost searching for what that was about, that sentence that came into my head about birdsong. And I've been driven by that. And it's this is all very abstract and tangential, but that's the process, and it's speculative, and you have to accept that it is a job, but it isn't a job. There's no job description. There's no research for this one. There can't be research and the writing had to be different because essentially I'm writing about emotions and not events. Other things have had events, and I've taken the Nabokov. I want to call him Nabokov. I've taken him and Banville and how they play games with the text, and that was my area of interest. And then you get to motherhood, and there's no room for that, and you need a new way of writing. And the old books were cerebral and intellectual and artistic, and motherhood is none of those things. It's physical, it's shouty, you can't remember sentences. And actually I realized I regressed into toddler just as much as my toddler, because I couldn't express myself because you're so scattered the whole time. So you need a new way of telling that story for it to in any way reflect what motherhood is, the messiness, the love, the drama.
Wow. But it sounds like you've been on a huge journey, Claire, in terms of you've had the experience of motherhood, of having a child, which dislocates anybody who goes through that. But then, as it were, most people, even creative people, then go back to doing what they did before. But it sounds like you're actually, as you say, in writing about motherhood, you're not going back to writing novels in the way you used to. You've actually gone through a life-changing experience. You have child, you have the chaos that goes with it, and then you've also decided to go back to what you did, a writer, but do it a completely, or embrace a different way of doing it. That's the, is that part of the journey? Was that, where did that drop, as it were? Is that planned? You just think, okay, I'm not going to go and write the great crime novel or the great downturn novel. I'm actually going to write about myself.
It's what the thing I'm trying to write about dictated how it had to be written. Like my past novels, I use male voices. There's nothing male about motherhood. I remember at one point wishing I could return to write another Tenderwire because it's a thriller plot and it's fun. Whereas my experience in motherhood was fun was not the word that I would have reached for. I found a lot of it quite traumatic, and I remember thinking there's nothing funny about motherhood. I see funny has always been a big part of A, what I love in writing, and B, what I love in other people's writing, and B, what I love writing funny things in my own work. And I really hit a wall and thought this is not funny. There's nothing funny about this. And actually the opening of the novel is not funny. And then as a child grows, you know, and things stop being life and death in the way they are when a baby is a baby, and when you're being you, funny came into it. You know, it's I suppose it's my DNA. But a lot of the novel is about saying goodbye to who you are, because the person you were is no good to you when you're a mother. Like in my case, the artist, the person who went out, the person who was free, that person's dead. It's like you're mourning the dead girl, and that's what motherhood is for me anyway. Was mourning that person who wrote those books that we're talking about now, say Celtic Tiger, all of. Like, sometimes I can't remember what they were called. You know, I'm struggling. What's the Celtic Tiger? Not it's the Devil I Know. Yeah, because I was that feels they were my young books. You know, now I'm onto middle age, which is really interesting in its own way. You know, you always hear about people going on about mortality. Oh yes, mortality becomes a big thing when you have a child, and it does. It's strange, and it's actually quite creative how you realize the finishing line's coming. You know, and this is it. Yeah. So I want to write about that stuff, not in a bleak way, but just in an acknowledgement of it way, because we are humans. This is the deal, and that seems my new task now.
That's very lovely, Claire. As you speak about humor, you actually got into a question that has been set by Patrick Mullen, indeed, and Patrick brings us to humor there and says that you say at some stage that you think that during the Tiger years it was as if people lost a sense of humor. Is he right in that? Was that one of the awfulnesses of that period? Do you want to speak about that for a moment?
It was like it was humorless. It was retrospectively it's very sad because it feels like a big swindle. You know, the Irish people were being swindled into borrowing all this money to pay for houses that were not worth what they were, and there was snobbishness really kicked in. And this is not who we ever were. But remember, I was talking about Germany and how poor we were, and how nasty that feeling was to know you're poorer than everyone else around here, and they are looking down on you. So I understood how when we were let into the sweet shop, we had to gorge ourselves, but then it went on and on and on and on, and you know, it didn't stop when it should have stopped. And yes, There were no, I don't remember it being funny anymore. I remember going, this is kind of nasty. This is not funny.
Yeah,
Um, this didn't strike me as Irish, you
yeah,
know. I was like the Ireland I grew up in. Like I say this, but actually it's true. Like when you got on the bus, you kind of had to make a joke. Just to, it's the way we did business. We were always joking. You know, it's just how as a nation we do business. We joke. We, you know, it's not like we're all being comedians. It just has to be some remark. Um, and now that we're walking around during a pandemic, the gags are back. You know, people are walking around cracking stupid jokes. They're not even funny, but we're like, haha, you know, it's just who we are. So, and it also, maybe it's that the jokes make you feel safe. I don't know, but like, say today I walked up to get my kid from school and I met three different people and we were all laughing. I have no idea who they were. Maybe it's just me just going, haha. I don't know, but like people are going around. It's a sunny day today, but people are in great form. But yeah, there's just that social interaction means laughter. And it became snobby, and snobby isn't funny. So snobby, you have to show how superior you are, and you don't show how superior you are by making stupid jokes. So maybe that was it. But yeah, I remember feeling very um unfamiliar. Like I don't recognize this place anymore. And actually, during the Celtic Tiger, I wrote a book set in the 80s because
mm,
that was my Dublin, you know, and that
mm,
was a sort of archaeological version of Dublin because I thought we'd never get that back. So I wanted to say, well, this is what it was. You know, it was a bit of a kip,
mm.
but creativity was everywhere. So were drugs, heroin. That aspect of Dublin in the 80s had to be there, but it was, I found, uh, an exciting time. I was more like I would have been, the character was younger than I was, sorry, older than I was, but I do remember venturing into town when I was 14 and thinking this is the coolest place ever, you know. So I was writing about that Dublin, um, and that was how I responded to the kind of nasty bitchiness of the Celtic Tiger. And then it was only when the Celtic Tiger, when we were officially declared in recession, that's when I was able to start writing about. Now that the witch was dead, I could describe what the witch was, you know.
But even as you did, of course, you described it with humor. And The Devil I Know is a very funny book.
Thank you. I hope so.
Oh my
I hope
goodness.
so.
And I'm thinking particularly about Hickey, the builder developer character. Where did you find him?
In my class in school, in
Oh,
primary school, he was just, again, it was this business of keeping it local. And I just remember this kid who was the biggest messer, but
huh.
there was a sort of entrepreneurial um, glint in his eye, if you know what I mean. Now, he didn't go on to be a developer, that guy, and I still see him knocking around. But like, I just saw, what if you gave him a load of money? You know, how is that going to work out if he goes to the bank and they go, yeah, here's loads of money, knock yourself out? And I did thought this is what Hickey would do, and I let Hickey loose. And you know, because I felt I knew who Hickey was as a kid, I felt confident writing him. You have to feel like you know who your characters are, you know, because you do live with them. You live with them for years. So that's why I took this fella to
A
be
sort of
Hickey.
a cute whore, or is that, am I going too far?
Sort of
Is
what?
is there a bit of the cute whore about him?
Oh yeah, shocking. But we had this mad teacher. If you cracked back to the humor, if you cracked a joke, you got your homework off. So this guy was always getting his homework off, and there was another guy who always got his homework off too, and he ended up he ended up in prison in England for armed robbery. You know, this is Howth. It was very. That's another thing about Howth. It's socially very mixed. There's great wealth, and there's the fishing community, and then there was people who went up, you know, in jail in England for armed robbery. So because anytime there's fishing, anytime there's a port, there's going to be heroin, unfortunately. So yeah, that's Hickey was funny because the kids were funny, and we were rewarded for being funny. I don't think I ever got my homework off. I don't think I ever said anything funny to that guy. He used to quote Pink Floyd all the time. He used to say, if kids came in, he had a school that if he said, what is it? Pain, panic. If he said panic, because this kid was all sent in to go, Miss McCluskey wants a lift home, I want to know, can she have a lift home tonight? And this teacher would go, panic. We'd all have to go, ah! And the poor child who was from a younger class would get very upset. You know, it was just, that's how we were educated. And it was fun. And I was happy. And he got me writing. That's the other thing, because humor is creative.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
And did that humour come back after Tiger ended and the downturn happened?
Not immediately. There was a very grim reckoning in this country when it was not funny. Nothing was funny. There was a lot of suicides, there were ghost estates, there was high unemployment, and I suppose fear was the main feeling amongst that, certainly that I was detecting, because especially when we got taken over by the Troika, that was epic. It was the IMF and the EU have now got the reins. You have lost your sovereignty. What are they going to do? It was terrifying. So yeah, there was always humor going and satire, but I don't remember really feeling when we were writing about. There was this punishment vibe. Brian Lenihan, now deceased from, well, that's another thing. Our finance minister was visibly dying of cancer. He was sicker every time we saw him. But he said we all partied, as in, you deserve this, it's your own fault. And there was just a grim vibe, which was fear. But now it's now it's a pandemic. We're all cracking jokes on the way to school. Yeah, I don't know. I do love being here. I do love it.
That's very, very lovely. The novel that we're just speaking about there, The Devil I Know, it's shaped as if it's the testimony of one of these tribunals through which Ireland seems to be perennially examining its conscience. Religion, however, seldom features in your writing. I wonder, are you conscious of being a product, a representative of post-Catholic Ireland? Is that an issue at all for you?
I would say religion does feature in that, like, the devil.
Well,
it's
you should have said Catholicism, right?
It's almost Irish style Catholicism where the devil is real.
Yeah.
And the devil's a player, and the devil's going to get you. If you sin, you will pay the price. So, I mean, that structure is there. Right. I am schooled in Catholicism, as the height. I don't know what proportion it was. In my day, it felt like about 95% of kids were in Catholic schools. And I'm a product of that, and it comes out, like the new novel has Mary, as in Mother Mary, Mother of Jesus. She's there, and not because I'm religious. I'm not. I am of no religion, but just if you're schooled in ceremony like that, and they are great stories, Well, okay, Jesus isn't a story, but the devil is, So if these stories are, ingrained in you at such a young age, especially something like the devil, like my father was exorcised as a kid, but like exorcised as in, get the devil out of him, he's so badly behaved, and the priest, the exorcist, it's just, he really took Catholicism to a new level. So, and my father still believes in the devil, and it's these, back to the childhood, back to Howth, back to, we have Puck Rock. When I do that, it means Ireland's Eye. Ireland's Eye has a rock broken off it called Puck Rock because the devil appeared there, and some saint, I don't know, cast him out, and that's why that rock is broken. So there's these visual reminders. And we had satanic worshipping going on big time when I was 18. Now I'm going to the total rabbit hole. It wasn't me, but we had a pet donkey who was slaughtered, and there were paintings of Satan everywhere. It was just
all this in nice middle class Howth. This is a kind of a shock to me, I have to say, and maybe to many of the rest of us who think of Howth as being a different place.
Oh yeah, Howth is. I had said it's a strange. It's a strange, historical kind of spooky, haunted place with. Yeah, I mean, it does facilitate that because of the geography of it, the symbolism of it. You know, it is I don't know, like during the pandemic, all the teenagers came out and because they couldn't go anywhere else, so they partied in Howth, and actually it was quite beautiful. You know, all these people sitting in meadows, enjoying themselves. But it just Howth lends itself to roaming around it.
Okay, great.
We've got some questions coming in. From Kelly, which one of your novels is the best, the truest expression of yourself?
Oh, well, the one I'm writing, the others aren't expressions of myself. And actually all of them are deflections, though they come from aspects of yourself. The one I'm writing is unguarded. The others are channels. They all come from something. I suppose the earlier ones are less guarded than the older ones. I mean, I couldn't call any of them expressions of myself, whereas I would say the new one will be. I already know it is. It's about trying to capture this experience that I've had. So that's not a good answer.
No, the answer to the question is the next one. The next book.
Yes, the next
She's got to hang on for that one.
Yeah.
And can I just continue with that? Is there? I presume there's humor in this book. Would you say that you've managed to put humor into the?
Yeah, it starts bleakly.
We can look forward to that too.
But then, yes, it does.
You mentioned the pandemic and the arrival of young people out in Howth partying or doing whatever they're meant to be doing or not meant to be doing, as the case might be. How has the pandemic been for you? Personally, or indeed for your writing? And it seems that it's been fruitful for your writing. Is that right? And how have you coped with the last year?
Well, we've coped. Well, I say we now because I realised that it became about a family unit. You know, we coped, and that was a really nice thing that we didn't want to kill each other after being locked up for. I can't even say how long it's been going on. So long. What is it? 14 months. Has it been, as a writer, it's been awful because I have a young child and the schools kept closing. When the schools are closed, you can't work. I remember just going, right, I'm going to work. I'm going to type here. And he wouldn't leave me alone, he being my kid, and stood over my shoulder and suggested endings for the sentences. And I was like, can you stop? Can you just? So then he started trying to type sentences. And you just, if there's a kid in the house, you can't work. You know, and I suppose the focus is because he's young enough for me to be his world, I can screen him from the weirdness of what's going on out there. And I'm actually glad he's not a teenager because their whole worldview can get really, having been a teenager, it just tilts, you know, and I wouldn't have that access to him when he's a teenager. I hope to, but you don't know what kind of relationship you're going to have with a kid. So I have been thinking that, yes, it's been terrible not being able to have space to work. And I'm someone who needs to be on my own, and I have that for that time. But at least I'm not worrying about my kid.
Great.
You know, he's okay. And that would really screw me up if I had worries about his mental well-being.
Absolutely.
And did that change things, Claire? I mean, the one thing that, you know, motherhood, or parenthood, that first thing where you have an infant who needs you, you know, 24/7, but then finally one day you do boot them off to school and they're in somebody else's care for a number of hours every day, and you kind of get your sense of self back. Has that been a strange sense of pandemic that you've gone back to a 24/7?
Yes.
You haven't got an infant,
absolutely.
clearly, but you've got somebody who isn't leaving every morning and coming back at 3:30. Is it, how has that kind of, has that added something to the progress of the book? This kind of almost, you now have not the infant, but you've got this bigger child who's there all the time.
Not this book, maybe another book. I know, as I mentioned, I'm writing the last chapter, and it is a line, we got through a pandemic, and that does feel like an accomplishment and a comfort. So, you know, that is going, I'd say that line will be in the final draft, you know, and then you got older, and then we got through a pandemic, and, you know, then we're okay. So, it won't inform this book, because this book is about early years, the early motherhood years, but you never know. That's the whole thing about being in any art form. You don't know what you're going to do till, I think of it as if you're ever in Italy, you say to the waiters, or they say to you, they shout at you, "Di me, tell me," and you know, ooh, but writing is you sit there and you go, "Tell me," because you're not, it's not you, it's your imagination, and you don't know what it's going to tell you, and you have to wait for it to tell you something. It's telling you, you're not telling it. And I don't want to kind of turn it into a big mystery, but that's what it is. You sit there, you just sit there until the human brain tells you where to go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope it cooperates, and it doesn't usually, but sometimes it tells you, and that's happy.
And there's a question that's come in here actually from Marjorie House. Marjorie said there's a great line, she says, in Melmoth the Wanderer, saying, "Emotions are my events." And wonders, do you feel that this describes what you're trying to do in writing about motherhood? Or would you reject that description, she wonders? Emotions are my events.
Well, what are we except emotions? You know, it is certainly, emotions have started all the feelings. They're written, all the novels are dictated by emotions. They're about moods, and the mood turns into a story by the process of sitting there until your imagination tells you how to write that story. But they do start out with a mood, whether it be loss or anger or longing or whatever. So yes, I would embrace that description from Melmoth the Warrior, Melmoth the Wanderer. Emotions are events. They are. It's what we are.
And a question here about the afterlife of your novels, or perhaps it's the beginning of the lives of your novels. What are your hopes for your novels once they go out into the world? Should they merely entertain, or is there a higher social purpose in their parable-like form, is the question.
Well, there's a question. You have to not have any hopes at all.
Really?
You do your thing. You click send when it's finished, and then you have to forget about everything that follows. Because it's just between you and the page, you know. I suppose Devil I Know was the most about-y novel. It was about a thing, about I wanted to respond to the Celtic Tiger and the anger I felt at this great swindle. So that, but you have no expectations when a book goes out. It would be nice, you know, if people responded to it. I do feel with the novel I'm writing about motherhood now that this isn't, I haven't read a book about motherhood that, specifically the early years of motherhood. I haven't read a book that was a touchstone for me in the way I have always used novels as touchstones to guide me through life, through existence. To, you know, the novels that I love most are the ones where I'm reading them, I go, oh, I felt that too. I understand this. I hear you. This is, we're here together on this planet. We are human. So I haven't encountered a novel about motherhood that has chimed with me. So I suppose I want to write
Brilliant.
the novel I want to read.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And a question here actually about what you're reading. Who at the moment are you reading? And I suppose the suggestion is, who do you admire on the Irish stage at the moment, on the Irish writing stage at the moment? Who's doing stuff that you'd recommend to the audience?
I've just finished White City by Kevin Power, and
Ah.
it's about the post-Celtic tiger, and it's really funny, and he has that thing of hidden characters going on where you don't really know what's happening, but I admired it mostly because he is a writer's writer. You know, he sentence by sentence, he surprises you, he makes you laugh. He captures that thing of capturing feelings that you felt, and I that would be he is writing about, again, corruption among the elite in Ireland. That's not why I responded to it. I responded to it because it's got a great narrator, a great first person narrator who brings you with him, and it's hilarious as well. But it is because he can write. You know, that's what it's about, writing.
Why does it not surprise me, Claire, that you like a novelist and novels that surprise you and that make you laugh and that are very beautifully crafted? Because of course they're precise descriptions of your own absolutely lovely, lovely, lovely works. And just one more question here, actually, and I don't know, this is very, very speculative, but because of course you're so familiar with the boom bust literature, the austerity literature, out of which you wrote before, any predictions about what's going to come out of the pandemic? What's that going to spawn for you? Books about motherhood? Anything else that we might be able to look back upon? What should we fear in the writing or look forward?
I don't know. You know, I was thinking about the Spanish flu, and there's no novels or mental image of the Spanish flu. So, you know, say, Joe, you're doing your Ulysses zoology, and I'm reading Ulysses along with you, and it was published in 1922, and there'd been this. He'd have written it during the Spanish flu and the war, and instead of writing about, you know, the First World War and Spanish flu and all of that, he writes about ordinary people getting on with it. You know, on the other hand, you had Yeats going, things fall apart, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, you know, we're spinning in a, you know, Yeats was on a totally different bus and was reflecting the drama. So are we going to have
who knows what
Joyce
bus
or Yeats?
That's great. That's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I think I'm afraid we've actually come.
No, Joe, you have to ask your choice question. It's been mentioned 7 times during the conversation. You have to have
yes,
a
of course.
conversation.
And you begin, of course, The Devil I Know with a quotation from Finnegan's Wake. How wonderful, how delightful, how absolutely marvelous. Why? Or dare I ask why?
Well, first it's set in Howth.
Yeah, but that's a perfectly good reason.
He takes characters that I then took from Joyce, who are also, there were Gaysford St. Lawrence's living there. They were cousins of the St. Lawrence's, but Joyce had taken the first St. Lawrence, Tristram. So, and also, yeah, there is this, Joyce is my Irish identity as a writer.
Wonderful.
He's our pedigree, you know, he's our guy, he's our football team.
Fabulous. And he loved your Howth, and he loved Howth Castle, and indeed,
Joyce
that's marvelous. And he had some of the biggest, the most important moments of his life out there, of course, as we know from Ulysses and everything else. Thank you very, very much, Claire. That was absolutely marvelous. And thank you for, indeed, the other questions that we haven't got around to do. Mike, do you want to tell us something about next week?
Sure, will do. So next week, we have Katrina Crowe, who I think most people will know who Katrina Crowe is, in Ireland at least. If you don't, in America, Katrina Crowe was head of special projects at the National Archives of Ireland. And basically, in the last 30, 20 years, there wouldn't be Irish history written if it wasn't for Katrina. This is somebody who's fought the wars on social justice issues around mother and baby homes, etc., etc. She is one of life's great people, an absolute power with. So it'll be a great conversation next week, and it won't be a conversation short of opinions. So do join us, usual time, 9:30 Irish time, 4:30 the US East Coast. You can get your tickets on Eventbrite. You know the Zoom address, or else if you want to, you can watch it on YouTube.
Fabulous. Thank you very, very much, Matt. I can't look forward to too much to Katrina Crowe, a formidable woman who, as Mike says, will have an awful lot to say. She's going to keep us very, very lively. But we were kept wonderfully lively today too by Claire. Thank you. Thanks a million, Claire. Absolutely, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you.
And enjoy the sunny day in Howth tomorrow.
Yes. We're going to have good weather tomorrow. Wonderful.
Going to queue for the chipper.